use the word emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 223.2K0440, certificate number 24598, Cincinnati chili.
No other chili has a taste that's so divine. Together, at last, it's skyline time.
Have you had Cincinnati chili?
I have had chili and I've had spaghetti. I've never had them together.
Really?
I've sat at the table. Do you know that little chili place that's somehow still there by the Ballard Bridge? That little
For sure I do.
Building?
I go there all the time.
I bet you've been there a lot.
I do.
Any Seattle place that looks like it did in 1912, that's where you eat.
It's wonderful.
I have eaten something else there while somebody else... That place has Cincinnati chili, I think. And I have eaten there while my friend had Cincinnati chili. And I think that was the first time I knew of Cincinnati chili. And I was kind of appalled.
So the place you're describing is a place called Mike's Chili Parlor. And it's right by the Ballard Bridge. And it is like...
very interesting to those of you who live in Bulgaria or Tierra del Fuego.
It does have the ye olde appearance. And they do a form of Cincinnati chili, although I wouldn't describe it as like the perfection of the form. It's its own thing.
Do they claim that it's Cincinnati? That's what it says on the menu, I think, right? On their little chalkboard?
I mean, they need to say that because there's a lot of confusion when you start talking about chili, particularly now, but in fact, in a way, always, because chili has a...
There's already issues with defining chili, right? Does it have beans? Does it have meat?
Right. Within people that care about chili, they are already arguing over whether or not you should put a single grain of pepper in it. If you can still call it chili, if it has anything other than...
Is that a real thing? Which spices it has?
Yeah, absolutely.
People care about chili a lot, and I don't know if I understand that. Is it because of the maybe the spiciness of the dish has led to this kind of competitive cook-off angle where it becomes kind of a masculine thing? Who can make the fieriest chili? 6 alarm, 7 alarm. Look out, ladies, 8 alarm.
It's that. I mean, chili is an American, a northern Mexico, Texas, Southwest kind of invention. It's not a thing that is as old as time. It started to develop around the mid 19th century. Originally, chili was a thing that they would cook in pots as a kind of meat and spice concoction, and then they would condense it, right? Take the water out of it until it became a block, like you would head out on the trail.
I was about to say, so it's like trail food?
Yeah, with a block of chili starter. And then you would take this block and add water, cook it in your steel pot on the trail.
They invented Campbell's condensed soup.
Yeah, it was a kind of food that you could basically freeze dried camp food in the mid 19th century.
But it doesn't really the Olmecs didn't eat chili, is what you're saying. It doesn't have a lot of apparent Mesoamerican antecedents.
No, and the original chili, as described, did not have beans in it. Beans were a popular food in the Southwest, but chili itself was this sort of combined, dried beef, chipped beef combined with chili seasoning and didn't even have tomato in it at first.
No beans, no tomato.
Yeah, it was just
This is like when you find out that pizza just used to be flatbread with olive oil on it. That's not pizza.
And so when people started, and the desire to have, or the impulse to have chili be a kind of specialty dish that you worked hard on was also, it's contemporaneous with barbecue also being a kind of regional specialty that has, the St. Louis barbecue people will argue that their barbecue, puts the Carolina barbecue to shame and so forth.
I think the boundary wars are an effect of these being safe culinary fields for men at a time when it would have been too feminizing for men to have brownie recipes.
Right, cakes.
But still the impulse to make delicious food is obviously not gendered.
Right.
It's just our messed up culture of the time and maybe now. So men have to...
You should try my delicious cake.
I would love to try your delicious cakes. Is that a euphemism?
No, you never eat anything I offer you. You're always like, oh no, that's fine. As though my food is like somehow, I don't know, full of peyote.
You just love
which it is.
Safeway cakes. I was eating some like trail mix upstairs and you were like, you can't eat that. Don't eat that. But the thing about chili and barbecue is there's specific qualities that make it seemingly safe in a masculine world. The spiciness, both of them, for example, are very hearty, meat-heavy foods. Barbecue has kind of the outdoor open fire thing, which I guess makes it seem plausibly masculine. And then chili has a different kind of heat. It's got the spiciness. And then just because there's men involved, it turns into this pissing contest over, can you put mustard in the sauce? Can you have beans in the chili? Like, you notice women not fighting about whether or not chocolate chip cookies should have walnuts. Oh,
the women in my family do, good sir. In fact, chili was originally a thing that was developed by Mexican women and Tejano women.
Oh, interesting.
So it was, when it first arrived on the scene, like the chili was popularized in the city of San Antonio, and the women that were famous for making it in their chili joints, as they were called, were known as the chili queens of San Antonio.
Chili joints. So these are restaurants you would go to just to have chili. You're sweaty. You're off the trail.
That's right. Chili joints. Well, no, I think this is by the late 19th century when it had started to become a cuisine rather than, working class cuisine, right. but not a cowboy food.
These are diners now.
And it was really the Columbia Exposition in Chicago that brought chili to the wider world.
It's always that damn World's Fair.
It really is.
Can you imagine what the world would be like if Chicago had been like, no, pass.
Yeah.
Like LA trying to get rid of the Olympics. We don't want to have a World's Fair. It seems like a lot of trouble to have a big white city.
It's always, how many things in the omnibus have we traced back to the exposition?
Every single omnibus entry. Like if you look at any of this, coppicing, that's World's Fair. Right. Chastity belts, World's Fair. That's George right. Bush's crack dealer,
it's all back to the World's Fair.
It's all World's Fair.
So the world went to the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, and there was a Texas pavilion, and they were serving chili, and it really struck a resonant chord with people.
As we saw in the Doritos entry,
mm-hmm.
like Southwestern food was delicious and nobody knew.
Right.
Like there was a weird market imbalance. There was an arbitrage opportunity. Like it's kind of like when Thai food hadn't caught on yet. Like there's this amazing food and nobody knows.
Nobody's heard of it, and here it is, and it's really easy to make.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't. It was right at that same time, 1894, that the first packaged chili powder was introduced. Prior to that, obviously people were making chili powder around the world by grinding up chilies, but it was the first time someone had taken chili powder and it made an industrial product out of it. So immediately afterwards, after the World's Fair, suddenly you could acquire chili powder and use it as a seasoning.
People weren't, so elsewhere in America and even Europe, people were not putting chili powder in their eggs or their soups or whatever.
Well, paprika,
paprika, come on.
Chili was used as a spice, and in Asia, chilies have been a food seasoning.
People knew
forever.
about chili as a pepper.
Right. And you could dry it and grind it. It just wasn't a thing you would buy in a store. It was a preparation, right? That you would make as part of making your regional cuisine. But it wasn't a thing where you would buy a package of it and experiment with it. Like, oh, what if we put chili in lemonade? What if we sprinkled it on ourselves before we made love?
This is what happens today, like chili on desserts,
Right.
like all these schmancy restaurants. Do you think that it's odd that chili is named for the pepper, right?
Right.
Like I think of chili as growing up on mid-century canned chili, I think of it as a meat and bean dish. That was always my dad's go-to dish when he had to cook.
Like
my
so
mom,
many dads.
Yeah, like my mom often had she's not unlike your mom. She's a busy bee, hard worker, always got something going. She would have even when we were little, she would have a part-time job at a embroidery store at the Northgate Mall, or she worked the King Tut exhibition when it came through.
Yes, of course she did.
In 78 or whenever that was.
A proctor.
Yes, she was amateur docent of some kind. And whenever my mom was gone, my dad didn't have that many options. It was either going to be fried egg sandwiches or canned chili. And of course, we loved that because fried egg sandwiches and or canned chili are delicious.
Right.
And so the idea, like I always think that chili has to have beans, but I'm not crazy about the beans.
Right.
So I was happy about the discovery later in life that there are these purists who don't want beans in their chili.
The Texas-style chili people.
But it's weird that these trail people would not have put beans in their chili. It's a common part of that cuisine.
Right.
It's less perishable than the meat or anything else you're putting in there.
They would have had beans with the meal.
Exactly.
They just
didn't put it in
dump it in the chili.
And I think they're not wrong. I think it doesn't do the chili any favors.
Well, and so this period, right, the late 19th century, early 20th century, so much was happening in America at this time. It was a time of great.
It's always a time of great change in a people on omnibus.
But this in particular was a time of a lot of immigration to the United States, people coming from all over, but also a sense of kind of integrating the South into and the Southwest in particular into American culture. Like Texas had always been a faraway place, and now Texas was becoming more than just a wild outpost, but Texas food, Texas stuff was in vogue.
I wonder if it had some cachet from its just unique history as formerly an independent country, kind of like when Hawaii joined the Union, and then we're all like, "Ooh, pineapple! Tell us more."
Well, and the period between the rise of the railroads and the motor car, which would allow you to from Ohio drive down to Texas and check it out and come home. By early 1910s, Texas chili parlors were starting to open up around the country, like hamburger stands, and people were chili was kind of a thing that not quite exotic, but it was a new style of.
It's cheap and it's filling,
cheap working,
and it
man's
actually
food.
has flavor,
Right.
Which used to be kind of expensive people's food. Poor people ate potatoes and what?
Right.
That's about it. More potatoes, cabbage,
potatoes and potatoes.
and now here's like an inexpensive food that really packs a wallop.
That's right. And was the type of thing that you could pull over. There'd be a roadside stand in a lot of ways, like our own aforementioned Mike's Chili Parlor, which opened in Seattle in 1939.
Wow.
It was
not a lot of 30s restaurants still open in Seattle.
No, and that was in Ballard, which was a seafaring working class part of town. You could go over and get a bowl of chili. It didn't require a lot of fuss and muss. It was a thing that went well with beer.
Right. That's true. That's true also. You think about that driving a lot of the Asian food trends now, and it's really what's good drinking food.
What is good with beer. But during this same period, it was a time of a lot of immigration from the Mediterranean into the United States. Italy and environs were sending a ton of new immigrants to the United States. But one of the chapters of that Mediterranean immigration story is related to the Balkan Wars that happened. There were a couple of wars in the Balkan Peninsula that happened immediately before World War I. arguably one of the major causes of World War I, during which time all of the Balkans had been part of the Ottoman Empire for many hundreds of years. And during this early part of the 20th century, it was a time of Balkan national identity. We've talked about this before on the Omnibus in the Maraschino Cherries episode. The Slavs of the Balkan Peninsula were.
You think they're all Slavs?
Well, not all Slavs. I mean, the Romanians aren't. But
Slavs with a V.
The Southern Slavs.
I thought you were complaining about all those Slavs immigrating.
No. The Slavs immigrate down to Washington from Alaska. That's how I got here. But they were rebelling against the Turks and pushing them out, and there are a couple of wars that happened in quick succession. But it was a time of a lot of turmoil and upheaval and violence in the Balkans, in Greece in particular. And so a lot of people immigrated to the United States through Ellis Island during that period from that part of the Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean. And they arrived in America, and there was a sort of diaspora of Greeks and Macedonians that went to places in what we I think have agreed is the Midwest: Detroit, Ohio, Chicago. A lot of that population stayed in New York, and they maintained a kind of what would you call it? An identity within these regions. They were Orthodox Christians, so at this point in time, I mean, this was an era where there was a lot of prejudice against Catholics.
Did they somehow avoid that? You could kind of see Protestants turning on any Eastern Orthodox believers as easily as the Papists.
I think there was a lot of Orthodox Catholic rivalry because they were the Orthodox Greeks would move into neighborhoods that had formerly been Catholic or Jewish. They weren't troubling the high part of town where the Episcopalians lived. They were mucking it up.
I guess if you want to get the most bang for your prejudice buck, you go after the Pope, not the Patriarch of Constantinople.
That's right. That's right.
Like, really, how many Greeks are you trying to annoy?
Well, and Greece has a certain hold on the American imagination because the founders were so enamored with ancient Greece.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you always can kind of, if you're looking for a reason not to be prejudiced against Greeks, you can
I constantly am.
You can always find a way to connect them to their ancient culture.
The Greeks certainly do.
They
will tell you everything they invented.
Love to do it. But so here we have this population of recent immigrants from Greece and Macedonia and Bulgaria and Albania. Who are arriving in New York and then sort of populating the Midwest. They're looking for ways to make a living in the United States, and
make a drachma,
and that often happens with new immigrant populations in food. Right? They were good cooks at home. They find a way to introduce some of their cuisine to the Americas.
What's interesting to me is that my impression of a lot of the Greek restaurateurs then as now is that they were not like, hey, America, come have some stuffed grape leaves. Like they started making burgers and pasta.
Right.
This is a plot point in
Chibuga.
This is exactly. Like there's a Greek diner by my house that has pizza, but it also has burgers and it has gyros and it has. This is a plot point in the Great Brain books.
Oh,
are you familiar with these?
I know the books.
The books about the Tom Sawyer type swindler character in turn of the century Utah, I guess.
But I'm at a loss to recall anything from them.
There is a supporting character whose dad is a Greek restaurateur who moves to this little frontier town and opens, a hash house of some kind. And I assume this is part of this wave of Greek restaurateur immigration. And he's got a son named Basil, and the kids make fun of him because there's a new immigrant kid in town to beat up on. And our heroes kind of take him under their wings and he becomes part of the gang, and we learn that people from other cultures are okay. Uh-huh. But it's absolutely set around the premise of a Greek restaurateur moving to this tiny town in Utah in 1898 or whatever and opening a little joint.
Right.
A little diner of some kind.
Well, this was the period, as we've sort of touched on, of the joint, and one of the joints that was popular at this time was the hot dog stand, the hamburger stand. Right, these were kind of novel ideas. You could go out and get a burger or a hot dog in a little hut.
Quick food you can hold
Right.
and not have to sit and wait for a waitress. And
it was a tricky time because there wasn't a lot of food quality assurance. And so there was quite a bit of, I think, rightful suspicion about what was going in your hot dog or what was going in your hamburger. And the successful businesses of the time all found a way to reassure their customers that their hamburgers were only the finest grade of
snouts and hooves.
Yeah, I mean,
Houts and snooves?
the Houts and Snooves, they were two of the houses at Hogwarts, right? Like the guy that founded Steak and Shake, he actually would go out and grind the meat in the restaurant to demonstrate to his clientele that he was using steak to make his hamburger rather than
Because people were so sure
Houts and Snooves.
and it was cats and entrails. Yeah.
And Nathan's famous hot dogs that started on Coney Island was a one of their promotions was that they had people dressed as doctors, surgeons that would be there eating hot dogs.
My son, the doctor.
With the idea that, like, if a doctor would eat it, you know it has to be good.
They just paid people to wear white coats.
Pretty great.
What would be the modern equivalent of that? What would you dress somebody up in the worst hipster garb? Like
Cops, right? We believe that if a cops eat at a diner, it's got to be good.
I guess what you should do is have an airport eatery where the food isn't edible, but you dress people up as pilots. Because every time I see a pilot eating an airport, I'm like,
You're like,
oh, that's got to be the good
those
place.
guys know. But so all of these things kind of collided in a historical moment where this great influx of Greeks brought their own culinary tendencies to a time in American history where the hamburger stand, the hot dog stand, and the chili parlor were all also colliding. And in this moment, the idea of a Coney dog, a Coney Island hot dog, which is a hot dog
Is that
with
a specific?
chili on it, a hot dog. With,
Coney Island invented the chili dog.
well, no.
Oh,
This is what makes it fairly complex. The Coney dog
I'm making a chart.
is a hot dog on a bun, a steamed hot dog, that has chili on it and onions and cheese. That's the sort of canonical Coney. But the Coney Island dog arose other places before Coney Island, and it was called a Coney in those places. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, in 1914, a shop opened called the famous Coney Island Wiener Stand that was that sold hot dogs, chili dogs, and it was tied to the idea of Coney Island.
What is that idea? What are we conveying? Was Coney Island really such an amazing? I mean, today you would never use an amusement park as a signifier of good or even convenient or food.
Well, so Coney Island is, for futurelings that don't know, is a sort of, it's not even really an island. It's a little bit of an isthmus.
Seaside neighborhood of
in southern Brooklyn. And it's named after, the original Dutch name was Koning, not koning for king, but the Dutch word for rabbit.
Oh
right?
yeah,
A coney.
conies are rabbits, right?
And so when the English took over, they just kept the name Rabbit Island. And it became a seaside resort during this period, a boardwalk, lots of amusements. It was also an area that had a large immigrant population.
Does it convey kind of like leisure, like a fun vacation food, like saltwater taffy or cotton candy? Is that what a chili dog would have been to these people? Or is it sophistication of the big city that you don't get in Fort Wayne?
I think it's more the former than the latter. There on the boardwalk there was a restaurant called Feltman's German Garden, and Feltman's had served hot dogs and sausages, which again were a kind of immigrant food, right? A Central European kind of food, hot dogs. And they had an employee, an immigrant employee by the name of Nathan Handwerker.
Is he
He's the founder
famous?
of Nathan's. He eventually left Feltman's and opened his own hot dog stand, Nathan's.
That's sad that he had to work as a handwerker when he first came here.
He was a Handwerker. And he opened Nathan's in 1916. This is now 2 years after the Fort Wayne, Coney Island Wiener stand. So there was something in the air. Nathan's became very popular. Nathan sold hot dogs for 5 cents, which was about half the going rate for hot dogs at the time. And Nathan's popularized the hot dog stand idea nationwide. It kind of was a sensation, and people became aware of hot dogs. It's
an early version of the fast food boom of the 40s and 50s of the automobile era, right? Like we've come up with an efficient way to give you a cheaper product with less frills. It's just a hot dog we hand to you.
Right. And it was, I don't know, it was a combination of like, it's immigrant food. It's called a Frankfurter. I mean, a hamburger. These are kind of foreign sounding names, and that
they literally say what Central European country they're characteristic of, right?
Right.
Wiener. It's from Vienna. Hamburger is from Hamburg. Frankfurt is from Frankfurt.
And this gave it a little bit of an appeal. Also, a lot of these, early restaurateurs are Jewish or immigrant people that are kind of, again, trying to convert the few skills that they kind of can put to work in their new country. Like you can't just come and immediately become whatever you were in the old country. You have to adjust.
And even in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the people buying a nickel lunch probably are a largely immigrant population who like that, remember that kind of food, right?
Even before famous Coney Island, the Fort Wayne famous Coney Island Wiener stand, a restaurant in Green Bay, Wisconsin, opened in 1913. Started by a man named John Isaac. It was called Chili John's, and Chili John's was a place where this sort of Cincinnati chili story starts to get moving, and again, just like the Coney dog, the Greekification of chili seems to have happened multiple places at once.
Does it just get appropriated by the Greeks, or do they change something about chili?
They change something fundamental about it. And within Greek cuisine, there are a lot of ground beef or ground meat dishes.
Sure.
And those dishes are seasoned with a completely separate set of seasonings from southwestern Chile. There's a Greek spaghetti. And spaghetti is another dish that kind of gets appropriated and used by anybody that can think of a thing to throw on it. The only thing that doesn't get thrown on spaghetti is a baked potato. But everything else you can imagine, spaghetti can handle.
Yeah, it's just a base.
And the sauce that's popular in Greek spaghetti is something called salsa kima, which is a ground meat sauce, but seasoned with cinnamon and cumin and nutmeg and allspice and clove and bay leaves, like all these seasonings that, I mean, some of those get incorporated into southwestern food.
There's some cumin in southwestern food, but yeah, the chili would dominate all of that. You don't dump nutmeg into your
and you don't
taco meat.
You don't really put cinnamon or clove in it either. But all that is present in Greek food. And so as these Greek cooks were trying to find new foods to sell to their American audiences, they started to use these seasonings that they were familiar with and introduce into them a little chili powder, this new seasoning that had arrived only recently.
I wonder if it helps conceal bad cooking.
Just like any kind of curry, you can put any amount of partially spoiled meat in there, and the chili will cover it over. But the chili adding the chili seasoning, and in particular kind of adopting the term chili for what they were making. And it was a little bit of maybe a cultural, an attempt to make what they were making recognizable to their audience. They saw chili parlors. This was a popular dish. They looked at their traditional meat sauce and saw it as a sort of chili. It looks like chili.
It's like that Simpsons joke about calling falafel crunch patties and calling calling pitas pocket bread, so that you don't scare off an audience with your weird new Mediterranean foods.
Right, pocket bread, or calling gyros gyros.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, so many of these things are just somehow the morphing and melding happens somewhat spontaneously and in a way logically, right? What are you going to call that if you're trying to sell it to people? You don't want to call it mazooka or salsa keema, like your Roman Catholic next door neighbors aren't going to run down to eat your traditional dish. But
At some point you can. At some point you can switch back to tzatziki, but you got to call it cucumber yogurt for like 50 years first.
Right. And in this case, this seasoned meat, ground meat with nutmeg and cinnamon in it, over spaghetti and over hot dogs.
What? Wait, either or both?
It started, this sort of quote-unquote chili started as a hot dog topping, started as a Coney Island hot dog. It wasn't called a chili dog yet.
Do you like chili dogs?
I love chili dogs.
I'm a little skeptical. I mean, it just seems like gilding the lily. Like, a hot dog already is meat. You don't need to put a meat sauce on it.
Well,
I don't dislike it.
Well, sir.
But if I could choose between a chili dog and just a dog with regular toppings, I don't know if I would take the chili dog.
I make chili dogs here at home.
It also makes the bun soggier.
It does. How do you feel about a chili burger?
No.
What about a chili size, which is a
chili size?
Chili size is a kind of chili burger that is served. It's like 2 patties with chili over the top of it, not necessarily with a bun. It's just like hamburger and chili. There's a version of this with 2 fried eggs on top of 2 hamburgers covered with chili.
And it's S-Y''S? No.
S-I-Z-E. Chili size.
What?
It's just the way it's served.
It's just the size of a chili?
If you go to Randy's down by Boeing Field and order a chili burger, the 75-year-old waitress will say, "You mean a chili size?"
Is that the place that used to be a Denny's, so it still has the yellow hexagon sign, but it says Randy's now?
I think it actually used to be a Sambo's.
Oh,
quite honestly.
Wow.
Yeah, we could do an omnibus on that too. Anyway, no one can quite trace the exact origin of this hybrid dish because it seems to have arisen somewhat simultaneously in multiple places. But the
Cincinnati being one of them?
The sort of iconic or the generally accepted origin of Cincinnati chili starts with 2 brothers, Tom and John Kiradjieff, I think is how I'm going to pronounce it.
Is that a Greek name?
Kiradjieff.
Okay.
2 immigrant brothers who opened a little hamburger stand that was right next door to a burlesque place called the Empress, and so they called their place the Empress, and they started serving this Greek style chili sauce on top of spaghetti, all covered with cheese, and they lost their poor meatball. And the way that
there's no meatballs.
The way that they the original dish was spaghetti with chili. And then if you wanted cheese on it, you ordered it a separate way. And this became the standard. They described the different ways you could order this dish as ways. So
W-A-Y.
W-A-Y.
Not
so
size.
spaghetti 2-way is spaghetti with chili. Spaghetti 3-way is with cheese, chili and cheese. The 4-way is with chili, onions, and cheese. I guess I guess there's 2 4-ways. There's 4-way onion and 4-way bean, according to
confusing.
this. But it gets even more confusing because spaghetti 5-way, which is the big way, is spaghetti, chili, beans, onions, and cheese.
And these are not ingredients in the chili. These are toppings. The cheese and the
Toppings.
onions are.
So
So if
you-
you're a third-way Democrat, is that just a regular Democrat with cheese on the top?
That's a regular Democrat with cheese.
Gotcha. Like a Wisconsin Democrat.
So you would get a plate of spaghetti. It would have chili on it, and then a huge mound of cheese and onions and beans, all kind of on top of it.
It's grated cheddar. Is that
Yep,
what it is?
Grated cheddar, and like fine grated cheddar, not thick grade. And this became a super popular restaurant, a popular menu item. The Empress was one of those restaurants that kind of like Feltman's German Garden. People that worked at the Empress often went on to start their own restaurants. A former employee of Empress named Nicholas Lambrinidis opened his own restaurant, the Skyline Restaurant, which he opened that in 1949. That went on to become, I think in a lot of ways, the major purveyor of Cincinnati-style chili. There's another famous restaurant out of Cincinnati called Camp Washington Chili. They opened in 1940. This is all sort of around this mid-20th century wartime popularization of these regional cuisines.
I guess people are going off to war where they fight with one Polish guy, one
That's right.
Jewish fella, one Italian guy, one Irish guy, and they all swapped up.
And the Cincinnati-style chili was immediately offensive to people from other parts of the country that expected, raised on the chili parlors, raised on Texas-style chili, as you were raised on chili with no beans, to imagine chili on spaghetti, first of all, like dumping a can of Hormel chili on a plate of spaghetti doesn't really sound that appetizing to a lot of people.
No, you don't need to add. When you're eating chili, you're not like, I wish this had carbs. I guess rice is okay.
Chili on rice, chili next to rice, sure, but like particularly beans on spaghetti.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a little bit of a clashing carb situation.
You've also got the fact that you don't want, because of how you have to eat spaghetti because of the length of the noodles, you don't want other solid pellet-sized items mixed in.
Right, hard to get it all on one fork.
What's happening to the beans while you're trying to get the spaghetti on your fork?
Well, Cincinnati spaghetti, people in Cincinnati and the region eat Cincinnati spaghetti with a knife and fork. Like they don't twirl the spaghetti; they cut it up kind of like a pie.
That's horrifying.
So Cincinnati-style spaghetti was controversial and kind of remains controversial among people that have never tried it because it does not taste like spaghetti. It's its own distinct regional cuisine.
And it's mostly because of the spice blend, right?
The spice blend and the fact that a lot of times, I mean, the way that you make it is it's really made more like a soup. You throw the ground beef into a pot of water and spice, and you boil it for a long time, and it has a thin consistency. It's not a chunky sauce. It's kind of a roux.
That's interesting because often thin foods go chunkier with ads about how hearty it is, and you got to eat it with a fork. But you never see the other direction.
Right.
You never take like a hearty food, and you're like, what if this was kind of watery?
It's more of a sauce, less of a. You would never eat Cincinnati-style chili out of a bowl. It's not a thing that you would order on its own. It's a topping, and there are so many different varieties of it. In Detroit and Michigan, it's made out of ground beef heart. I mean, that's the
beef heart tastes very different than ground beef.
Yeah, and
it tastes like organ meat.
Well, and imagine putting a bunch of cumin and allspice on it.
It's also very chewy. I don't know.
Well, so they grind it really thin. Like they grind it not to a powder, but they grind it so that it's a
fine mince.
A fine mince, and then they boil it in water, and that kind of characterizes that style of it. It became the defining regional food of that southern Ohio, Kentucky, area. And I first had it in Newport, Kentucky, right across the river from Cincinnati. And it was a meal that appealed to me at at first sight, because I love chili, I love spaghetti, I love any kind of ground meat covered with cheese.
You're like, oh boy.
I said, oh boy. And I went into Skyline Chili, it was the first place I had it, and ordered a chili 5-way and took a big, excited bite of it and was shocked.
Because it tastes like cloves.
Shocked and appalled. What the heck is this crazy stuff? And if you had told me it was Greek spaghetti, I wouldn't have blushed, right? If you had said, it's seasoned with Mizithra cheese, I would have approached it as an exotic food. But thinking of it as Cincinnati-styled chili, I imagined,
You
as
were
most
ready
people
for
do,
Southwestern food.
that's right, that it was going to taste like chili. And it took me a couple of attempts at it to develop a taste for it. And once I did and realized that this was a cinnamon flavored dish, it was a Greek dish, not a Texas one, I became a real aficionado of Cincinnati style chili, and I seek it out wherever I can. And in fact, there are a couple of people here in Seattle, Cincinnati transplants, that occasionally will have a Cincinnati chili style like home party where everybody comes and eats this strange cuisine.
And you somehow get invited to these Cincinnati get-togethers?
I do, because I'm a multicultural.
You're multi-hyphenate.
I am. The Cincinnati style chili then actually kind of returned to the old country. One of the popular Cincinnati restaurants was called the Gold Star Restaurant, which was started by the Daoud brothers from Jordan, who brought a kind of Jordanian Middle Eastern take to the seasoning, which, it's not that far off.
Sure.
And they've been very successful in the region. They were endorsed by Pete Rose, and that anything endorsed by Pete Rose has got to be good. But they actually now have taken their chain and franchised it in Egypt and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Like, they've taken Gold Star Cincinnati style chili and reintroduced it, I guess, to the Middle East.
That's funny that they would that would catch on there, even though it's some American bastardization of their cuisine
of their own food, right? I mean, it's I think if you go to a lot of places and order an American style hamburger, and then as you start to eat it, you realize this is not anything like an American style hamburger. I mean, really,
I've had that experience in Asia several times, and I'm not like, oh boy, they've really done a great twist on the American hamburger.
No, you can get a hamburger in the United Kingdom that doesn't taste anything like a hamburger. But so this food, and unlike the cheesesteak wars of Philadelphia, it seems like the Cincinnati chili wars have stayed largely peaceful, let's say. I mean, Empress Chili did not end up being the major player, although they were kind of the originator.
Skyline stole their thunder?
Skyline stole their thunder. There are over 134 Skyline Chili restaurants now.
Wow.
But they still haven't really spread outside of I guess they're in Florida and Bahrain, but they're not, you don't find a Skyline Chili here in Seattle.
Cincinnati chili has not caught on, I think, in the way that, say, Philly cheesesteak had. And it might be something inherent in the coincidence that made that food so beloved in that part of the country. It may not have the inherent outsider appeal that, say, other regional foods like cheesesteak have had.
Yeah, Mike's Chili Parlor here in Seattle is a place that holds a special affection for those few of us that want to find the thing that's never been cleaned. But really, Mike's remains more or less a local bar that happens to serve chili rather than much of a destination. And the spicing of their chili isn't like super forward. It's still a food that you would not eat that chili on its own, right? You don't come in and buy like a gallon of that chili to take home.
I wonder if part of it is the lack of Cincinnati as a cultural signifier. Like, you're eating a Philly cheesesteak, you can think about the history of Philadelphia. You're thinking about Ben Franklin and Rocky Balboa. I mean, Cincinnati's a city that would elect Jerry Springer mayor
Right.
So maybe we should be a little suspicious of them.
There's another chili dog place down by Boeing Field called Matt's Famous Chili Dogs.
The show is now just hot dog recommendations.
And Matt's is also great, but Matt's also uses this kind of ground chili sauce that's not it's not a thing that you would ever like eat with a spoon. It's a topping rather than a food.
I'm okay with chili as a topping. It's a bit much. It's a bit much for me to have a big heaping bowl of chili. I'm okay with thinking of it as a sauce or a garnish.
I think the finest example of this dissemination of chili covered spaghetti into the world is a thing called Filipino spaghetti, which is spaghetti but topped with banana ketchup, which is ketchup made of bananas.
I assume it's ketchup made of bananas.
But it looks like they put red food coloring in it, so it looks like sauce. It looks like ketchup sauce.
They should just embrace it. It should just be yellow.
But it's like banana and brown sugar, and it's served with spaghetti and then topped with sliced hot dogs. So it's Cincinnati chili taking the full.
This is straight up Home Alone food. This is straight up your parents are in Europe and you're Kevin McAllister going through the cupboards and you've got bananas and hot dogs and spaghetti. And that concludes Cincinnati chili. Entry 223.2K0440, certificate number 24598 in the omnibus. Now, futurelings, I have no idea how long Cincinnati chili will survive as a cultural force. Hopefully it outlasts social media. Hopefully social media soon dies a painful death. But until it does, John and I are so dedicated to the ideals of this project that we can be found at Omnibus Project on your favorite platforms. We were respectively at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick on Twitter, and in John's case, Instagram. On Facebook, we were supporters of the Futurelings fan group, which I'm sure is now full of angry Cincinnatians. Is that even right? Cincinnatians? Mm-hmm. Cincinnaticuses?
Cincinnatiites?
Cincinnatites?
It's Cincinnatans.
I'm sure it's not. Cincinnatish. And there's a similar subreddit also called Futurelings. You can send us email if you insist at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. Please send us physical items, although not bowls of chili, to the Omnibus Project at P.O. Box 55744, Seattle, Washington, 98155. If you have the means and are looking for something a donation that will make you feel good, you can contribute to the ongoing financial health and stability of the Omnibus by making a pledge and becoming a member.
A member.
There are member benefits available to you.
The futurelings are given, you choose what kind of futureling you want to be on our Patreon site. There are many options. You don't just get to be a top-ranking cephalopod.
No, you have to buy it.
You have to buy in.
And there are various perks and benefits available to the different types of futurelings. But if that's something you haven't done, but you have a generous impulse right now, please investigate at patreon.com/omnibusproject.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, when foods were still differentiated by flavor instead of just colored pellets.
You think it's just going to be packets of paste?
Yeah, Cincinnati-style chili will just be another lever on the pump chili machine.
Cincinnati is some kind of a glowing nuclear pit at that point. So Cincinnati chili just glows in the dark.
We have no idea how long this sort of chimera of a civilization survives. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.